I will call this meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Public Works Committee. I'm the committee's chair, Councilmember Reich. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmembers Palmisano, Fletcher, and Gordon. Councilmember Bender is on her way, and Councilmember Johnson is representing the city at the Capitol today and may not be joining us. We have on the agenda 15 items. We have a public hearing, a discussion item. Item 14 is listed as a separate receive and file, but I'll be moving it with the consent. Of course, any consent item can be pulled for further discussion at the pleasure of a committee member. So item 2 is the wordplay large block event permit. That'll be for May 11th and 12th. Item 3 is the Uptown Food Truck Festival large block event permit for June 23rd. Item 4 is the agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for landscaping improvements at the intersection of Broadway Street Northeast and University Avenue Northeast. Item 5 is agreement with the Metropolitan Council for design of enhanced bus shelters on Hennepin Avenue for Washington Avenue 12th Street. Item 6 is a contract amendment with Kimley Horn Associates Incorporated for the Hennepin Avenue Street Reconstruction Project. Item 7 is a temporary construction easement with the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board for 10th Avenue Bridge renovation. Item 8 is the Special Service Districts 2019 Operating Plan and Budget Amendments for the districts that are listed. Item 9 is the grant for Minnesota Pollution Control Agency for electric vehicle charging stations. Item 10 is the grant application for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency for electric vehicles charging stations. Those are different actions for a similar project. Item 11 is the request for proposal for the 2020-2023 Public Works Consulting Pool. Item 12 is the Minneapolis Duluth Superior Passage Rail Alliance Board membership. We will be rejoining that group as a member. Item 13 is the agreement with the Minnesota Commercial Railroad for 33rd Street East Reconstruction Project. And item 14, receive and file for traffic zones restrictions controls for the first quarter of the 2019 report. Does any committee member wish to pull an item? Seeing none, I move all items as submitted. All in favor saying aye. Aye. Dissenting name. Those items carry, and we can now go to the public hearing. Good morning, Director Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Pleased to be here this morning. We have one public hearing. It's the Hennepin Avenue South Areaway Abandonment and Removal, the assessment for this work, and Stephanie Malmberg, the project manager, will present information on it.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Stephanie Malmberg. I'm an engineer with Public Works, Transportation, Engineering, and Design. And I am here to present for the public hearing for the areaway removal on the Hennepin Avenue South project. Specific address is 3032 through 3038 Hennepin Avenue South, PID 0402824210072. The work basically consists of removing an areaway which was in conflict with the Hennepin Avenue South project. The work was done in October of 2018, and the cost of this areaway removal was $6,081.25. Today, Public Works is asking the City Council to pass resolutions to adopt and levy assessments in the amount of $6,025 or $81.25 for the unpaid charges for the areaway removal. In addition, we're also requesting the Board of Estimation and Taxation to authorize the city's issuance of assessment bonds in the amount of $6,081.25 for certain purposes other than the purchase of utilities. And that concludes my presentation. I'll stand by for questions.
Any questions per the staff presentation? Seeing none, I will then open the public hearing. And this is public hearing number 1. Anyone signed in? Anyone wish to come forward? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public hearing and move the item as submitted by staff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting name. That item carries, and we can now go to the discussion item 15.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, with a point of privilege, I'm going to introduce Danielle Elkins with a little bit of a backstory. This is an item that was born out of work completed about a year and a half ago by members of our staff who participated in the National Smart Cities Collaborative organized by Transportation for America. Kathleen Mayel is here. She participated. John Wirch has also participated, and Josh Johnson has also participated. Out of work we completed with Transportation for America and the Smart Cities Collaborative, we recognized that we needed an acceleration of our work in the smart cities area, and you'll get a better definition of that as Danielle is speaking. Transportation for America stepped in and assisted us to obtain funding from the McKnight Foundation to fund a fellow in our department who is part of a national organization called FUSE. FUSE places fellows in a number of U.S. cities to tackle their toughest challenges. For us, that challenge is, in public works, keeping up with technological advancements and understanding how that's shaping our city. Danielle is about halfway through her fellowship with us. I know that you've each had a chance to meet her and talk with her. She has done a sizable amount of work in her time here, working both within Public Works and with staff, as well as within our regional community. And I've asked Danielle to give the committee a mid-year update on her progress. So with that, I'll introduce Danielle Elkins, our Urban Transportation Innovation Fellow, who is also a National FUSE Fellow. Danielle will be making a presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present my work to you this morning. Going to be talking about what we're calling advanced mobility, as well as my work plan and what we've accomplished so far in the last 6 months. Defining advanced mobility can be tough. The easiest way is to use the acronym CASE, so it's connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. The obvious ones, so autonomous, as our cars are becoming increasingly autonomous, we are using the Society of Automotive Engineers definition of the level of autonomy, and as the technology changes, we become potentially more autonomous. Connected is vehicles and their ability to communicate with infrastructure, with our systems, our signs, our striping, our traffic control systems, as well as our wireless network to be able to talk to other cars, emergency vehicles, as well as other people on the road. One that is becoming more frequent here, as you're seeing, is shared. All shared systems, shared scooters, shared bikes, car share, and additionally electric, as we try and meet our greenhouse gas goals, transitioning our vehicles. So within my work plan, the first item was knowledge transfer. How do we make sure that as these issues are changing on a daily basis, that we are keeping up as a city, understanding what's happening in other cities, what best practices are. So on a daily basis, I'm reading articles, reports, plans from other cities to understand what we need to do as a city to not only prepare, but make sure that anything that is coming is happening with us, and we are deciding what the outcome is, and it matches our values as a community. The challenge is that a lot of this does not exist. So we are trying to tell a story that has not been realized yet. And sometimes painting that picture can be additionally challenging, and making sure that the picture that is painted and the graphics that are created tell the story that we want for our city. So we have had some really great conversations regionally about creating some new materials to tell these stories the way that we want them, and showing the outcomes that we want for our city. And trying to explain this in a way that anyone can understand it. The second main piece of my deliverable is assisting in the Transportation Action Plan, which is our 10-year transportation plan that you are familiar with. We have a standalone topic within the Transportation Action Plan on advanced mobility. We are wrapping up our public engagement, and we've had some really meaningful conversations with the public around how does advanced mobility potentially impact those, particularly those that are most vulnerable in the community. So those that are unbanked, that do not have smartphone access and data plans, those with accessibility challenges. How does anything that is coming make life easier and not harder for them to interact with our system and to get around the city? And the third piece of my work is around public-private partnerships. Since joining the city 6 months ago, we've had conversations with, these are just some of the companies that we've spoken to, and it's really important for us to have those conversations because it's helping us to understand what's coming to the city. How do we, again, make sure that they understand what our goals are and what we want as a city, and to get out of whatever it is they potentially could be bringing to the city. It's also been very important to have partners within the public agencies, talking constantly with MnDOT, Metro Transit, and really making sure that anything that is happening within the community is happening. We're building each other up. We have common goals. We understand what we want to get out of this, and sharing the knowledge that we're developing as a city with other cities around the region as well. Two examples of regional collaboration. We joined with the City of St. Paul for a regional solicitation for funding for the Our Car electric car sharing network that's being developed. We're also doing a lot of work through the Twin Cities Shared Mobility Collaborative. They have subcommittees that are focused on specific issue areas that we need to focus on as a region to solve and prepare. And it's been a very, really great community to be able to talk through these issues and understand how it could potentially impact the community. So one of the things that I'm working on through that group is developing some regional workshops to be able to just focus on specific issues that are the most challenging for us in the region right now. And the first one is going to be June 6th. It is on mobility hubs. We as a region have decided to define mobility hubs as a place where people can connect with multiple modes of transportation in a safe, comfortable, accessible environment, facilitating convenient and reliable travel. It's about creating a safe place where you're transferring between modes that encourages people to try new modes, to interact within their community, and we are starting to understand what do we want as a region for a bare minimum of hubs throughout the region, what kind of amenities, what kind of branding, placemaking, what do we want at our hubs that are defined within the Twin Cities, and then that would allow the City of Minneapolis to continue with our individual pilot programs, as well as the City of St. Paul and other cities with our partners such as Metro Transit. So really looking forward to that. We have a list about 120 people that we are going to be inviting to this workshop, and we've got some really good facilitated activities as well as national speakers that are going to be coming in for that. The second workshop we're focusing on is all around data sharing. This is a very important issue right now, and it's a very important issue to you, Councilman. And we've done really good work. I think I can say I'm really impressed by the city staff and what they've been able to put together and create. I know you heard from Josh on March 5th. It really has become a national standard. Hearing from people constantly wanting to talk to our people, which is a really great thing. So what we want to do with this workshop is share with the rest of the region what we've been able to accomplish as a city, what is happening at the national level on this topic, since it is changing so quickly, and we have very specific rules within the state of Minnesota of how we deal with data. Making sure that the privacy of our residents still stays number one, and fostering those relationships. So the second half of this workshop, I was awarded an Innovation Lab grant from Fuse, my host organization, to bring in a facilitator to help us problem solve through some of the issues to determine, are there any things that we need to change either on the governance and policy side or on the data practitioner side to make it easier for individuals and public agencies to share information to problem solve, and really continue to use that data to drive specific decision making and understanding what we're using it for so we get better outcomes in the city. The third and final workshop that I'm working on, this is going to be more focused internally. This is focused on staff throughout the city. This is a very important topic right now nationally, is what do we do with the curb? It is the most dynamically changing area of our public right-of-way. It is impacted by the increase in e-commerce delivery, pickup and drop-off, Uber and Lyft. You have a lot more potential for conflict and need for flexible use going forward. So we're going to be convening a really interesting group of people with special invites to the private sector as well that have expressed interest in this topic and working with us on this topic, researchers additionally, and hopefully getting some small pilots, doing kind of a design sprint problem-solving session out of this workshop. An additional really important partnerships that we have is, because these are all issues that are evolving, we don't necessarily know what the outcomes are going to be. Partnering with the research community is really important. So I've had meetings with pretty much every area of the University of Minnesota and researchers that are working on this And these are the four main topics that we have partnered with them so far to be looking at. Managing the growth of last mile deliveries, again, related to the curb. Micromobility user fees and looking at the results from our pilot. Automated mobility on demand, understanding how people want to interact with potentially autonomous mobility going forward. And then looking at our scooter usage related to transit. Is it complementing transit use or not? And we're also partnering with MnDOT and Metro Transit on 2 of those research projects. And then the last one I wanted to share with you, there is an ideas competition put on by Metro Lab, and this was in anticipation of a Civic Innovation Challenge grant that the National Science Foundation is going to be putting out in the next 6 months. We submitted an idea with the Hennepin University Partnership and the University of Minnesota. Our idea was focused on how do we connect those that are recipients of county human services with increased use of shared mobility and making sure that those that are receiving those services are able to use shared mobility, and we're understanding it from the user perspective. Our idea was very well received. It was accepted for the Ideas Festival that happened April 29th, and represented from the U and Hennepin County were able to attend that. Our idea was one of the most popular, and they've encouraged us to apply for the federal grant program, so I'll be coming back and hopefully getting your approval to be able to join that team to do so. So a lot of really great things happening. I've been really enjoying the work and working with city staff, and it's really interesting work to me, and so I'm just really excited that I got to share this progress with you, and that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Well, thank you for that. Anyone have questions? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for this presentation and for the work that you're doing. I think it's really exciting that Public Works is investing in really thinking about the future, and this actually is a set of questions that I was just asking Director Hutchison about curb stuff, and she said, wait, there's a presentation coming, and I'll tell you that that conversation is anxiously awaited by many of my constituents who are observing the set of conflicts that are happening and really seeing the way we're trying to position parking and drop-offs and bike lanes and everything else that happens right up against the curb is often coming into conflict, and I'm anxiously awaiting the results of the work. So thanks for moving that forward, and again, thanks for the focus also on data privacy and data sharing. I think this is something that we should be leaders on. I think it's important, and something we should rightly be proud of the role that we've stepped into there. So thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this presentation. It was short but really interesting, and I agree with you that the time is right to really be considering this stuff. A couple of questions that might just ask you another layer of depth on some of your slides. Could you give us a preview of what the connected bucket might mean as a first step for Minneapolis? That was the part that was maybe not as clear as the other parts. Sorry, what does the connected bucket mean, and do we do that today in any way?
Through the chair, Councilmember Palmisano, it is, I think, probably the most challenging for the technical community as well. The biggest challenge is that we currently do not have federal guidance that would explain to us which technology is the preferred route for connected. So we have kind of two tracks right now that are evolving between the automotive manufacturers, the cell service providers, and the other suppliers. They're kind of working in tangent with each other, which means that we still don't know what our infrastructure as a city needs to be prepared to handle. We have had numerous conversations with national experts on this, and exploring in particular what we need to do to prepare our infrastructure in the city, and that for us is signing, striping, and particularly traffic, our traffic control system, and how that could incorporate. So usually when we talk about connected, it's vehicles talking to infrastructure, so being able to see and know what the infrastructure is and where it is, and also being able to talk to the signal system to know there's a red light up ahead, or there's an emergency vehicle that tells the signal that it needs to change, and that tells the car that it's going to be stopping as well. It's the challenge with the investment in cars is, as we manufacture cars, it's usually a 7 or 8 year cycle. So as they're investing in those changes, we still have another 7 or 8 years till we really know what we need to be prepared for. So for us, it's just making sure that our systems are going to be compatible with whatever comes, that we're prepared as a city for that, and then working with any other partners to test those systems as well.
Does it usually mean that we need to be more consistent in how we do all of those things on our streets, the striping, the distances, or does it allow for variation?
Chair Wright through the council. It's a good question. I think that's still kind of an evolving thing, because if we end up with one potential scenario, it should be able to understand the different types of lane striping and signals. And I think that's still a big question for the community is at what point is it autonomous or connected enough to actually understand correctly? The way that the level of autonomous that we have now in, say, like a Tesla, as it's driving down the road, it recognizes striping, but it doesn't recognize if there's an exit on the freeway and the striping goes off, that it should jump back over. So a lot of these cars will start to go with it and then cut back in when it realizes it wasn't supposed to be doing that. The technology is not there yet. And so I think it's still yet to be seen, and we don't know.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Panisano, you're asking really smart technological questions that I hear a lot. And one thing that I've worked with Danielle on and with all of our team on is that we should continue to build the city we want and expect that private sector technology matches to the community we want to build. And that's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, but I think if we hold true to what we hold as important as a city, that we should expect the technology to come along to where we are versus vice versa.
Thank you. That's really helpful and encouraging. Another question I had was, you had a slide about mobility hubs, and I'm curious, it was a cute cartoon and picture, but I'm curious, do mobility hubs exist yet? And if so, and if not, rather, are there other cities looking to do this type of thing too?
Through the chair, Councilman Feliciano, yes, they do exist in limited capacity in Europe. So that cute little graphic is actually from a European model that's already been created. It is in the works in many U.S. cities right now. LA has an active RFP where they are looking for assistance, and they've done some limited amenities installation. A lot of cities, though, are at the same kind of point as us, where we're trying to define what does that mean for us, what does it look like for us, and then starting to do some pilots and starting to do some smaller improvements to get incrementally to a much bigger scale of mobility hubs. The hope that when we do that regional workshop is that we've already created kind of a draft pamphlet of this is what we want mobility hubs to look like within the region. And we've gotten national interest of like, once you guys figure out what that is, can we then borrow it? And then it'll be implemented in more cities. So we're trying to talk to as many cities about this topic as possible right now, just because it is something that we're all figuring out together.
And then one more question, if I may. What made you choose those 4 research topics with the University of Minnesota? Were those areas of mutual interest between the university and Minneapolis, or what made you land on those 4 items?
Chair Wright, through the chair, Councilman Feliciano. The 2 of them were a request that came from the university, but was a result of our conversations with them, of explaining to them these are the things that are the most challenging for us right now, and then also understanding what the national topics, so research we're doing here could have national relevance, so particularly the e-commerce deliveries, that everyone's dealing with that right now. So that was an obvious one for them to ask us to work with. And the one about getting kind of more feedback from people in terms of how they want to deal with autonomous vehicles is also kind of a continuation of some research that's already being done at the U through the National Science Foundation around autonomous vehicles, so that was a logical next step. The one about user fees for shared mobility, that has come out of an evolving conversation we're having with specifically the group that focuses on public financing and revenue models at the U, as well as MnDOT, that it was already identified as an issue for MnDOT, it was identified as an issue for us, and so they figured out that we were all having the same conversation, and we finally got all in the room together and agree that this is something that's really important. And we've also heard from the federal level that they would like some more research on this topic as well. So kind of everything confirmed that this was something that was really important to us that we needed to focus on. And then the last one, which was the relationship between scooters and transit use. that was a specific request from Metro Transit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for all the exciting work. It's great to hear this presentation. I think very helpful for us to get an update. I wanted to talk a bit about the workshops and particularly the curb, but maybe also the mobility hub too, and offer the reflection that it would be exciting to think about this as an opportunity to not only sort of advance our technical expertise, but also to think about how we're communicating and engaging about these decisions. And I think about some conversations I've had with my colleagues in North Minneapolis who are looking back to decisions that were made last term before they were in office and have almost 180-degree difference of opinion with what decisions were made last term, where there were projects where bicycle and pedestrian safety features were left out of projects, frankly, and now wanting to figure out how we could add them back in, and now it has become either impossible or extremely expensive. And I think, honestly, if we are doing our job well as a city of engaging the community and laying the groundwork for making those kinds of decisions, we shouldn't have a 180-degree position change from term to term. And so I want to think going forward how we create more continuity, particularly when we look at race equity, in really engaging deeply in communities who maybe haven't had the opportunity or haven't been engaged in talking about technical transportation terms, so that when we go with a decision about a street, we're asking the right questions, we feel like we're engaging the whole community. And I think a lot of this around how do we create these hubs or how do we think about the curb, those can become very technical very quickly, and they can become sort of insider decisions that whoever happens to be at the table get to make. And I think it's really important, if we want to think about transportation equity, that we move away from that and move into some deeper engagement with community around transportation and mobility decisions, starting with where people are and how they get around today and what's available in communities around our city. So I'm really excited about these, both from a technical perspective, but also how we can learn about how to communicate with community in the long term around these transportation decisions.
Chair Wright, Councilman Better, absolutely. Part of what we're doing on some of our initial work in the mobility hubs is using some data tools to understand not only where people are going and kind of natural cluster of needs of resources, but also connecting with where people are accessing human services with the county. So where are those buildings? And we've actually overlaid pretty much all of these data sets to understand what is happening in these areas of concentrated poverty, and in particular, what are the potentially best helpful locations of mobility hubs within those communities. And our hope is that once we get to, a general area of where we think the best, most impactful place to be is to then be able to go and have those communications with the community to say, what makes sense for actually what's happening in the community? What are the right blocks to be putting this? And then in particular, doing some one-on-one kind of community planning charrettes to understand what are the best amenities for this location, for this type of community? What would make you feel safer and more comfortable as well?
Mr. Chair and Vice Chair Bender, I'll also add that this is work that is in addition to the work of our Transportation Action Plan. And in some ways, it's like we have to make ourselves smarter so that we know even what questions to ask, and that was a purpose of the fellow. And I'm glad that Kathleen is here to hear your remarks about really being sure that we dig into the community, and I'll ask these two to discuss how to make sure that the two efforts are linked together from a meaningful equity outreach perspective.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I think that interface between our ability to have the conversation internally will directly affect our ability to communicate with the public, but never losing sight of that dynamic is really where we get the value for our action plan, is that interface point and not just an internal thing. But it's very great. I think this report, as my colleagues have explored with their questions, a very exciting document. It's sort of imbued with so much more that we need to do in terms of our action planning. So it's just, I think, such a central piece, and it definitely demonstrates that we're, not only forward-looking, but we're forward-analyzing and hopefully future-shaping, and not just to be shaped by. And so I think this is the kind of inquiry and document direction that gets us in that place. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Look forward to future reports. With that, if there are no further questions or comments, we move to receive and file the report that we just obtained from the staff presentation. Any further discussion? Seeing none, approve item 15. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Dissenting name. That carries, and we have completed the agenda and can be adjourned.